Well, good morning, everyone. This is R.J. Kelly. I'm founder and chief visionary officer of Wealth Legacy and Wealth Legacy family of companies in San Diego. It is a glorious day in our beautiful city here, and so I'm delighted you could join us to hear two really wonderful and very wise friends, Dr. Joel Siegel and Dr. John Brustetter. And this morning, we have something that we do, and we'd love to invite you all to receive this from us as our gift. It's absolutely free. You can get it every day, or you can get it a couple times a week or once a week. Something called Quote Action. And it's a quote of some thought-provoking individual, famous person, author, playwright, etc. And then there's an action that follows with it. And so this morning, I thought it was quite appropriate. And so please let me read this to you. So, dear RJ, here's your quote action of the day. It's when you run away that you're most liable to stumble. It's when you run away that you're most liable to stumble. And that's from screenwriter and producer Casey Robinson. And so the action for today is to think of a conversation you've been avoiding and ask yourself, what's the cost of not having it? Today, we're going to be talking about unsticking the stock. What do you do when you're in conflict, particularly if you have a business partner or partners? What if you're in a family business? And what if you're an executive or a business personality that is in a business where you work for someone, you work for a company, but there's conflict that's going on? How do you resolve that? And of course, the things that we will learn from today or be reminded of from today, many of you probably know many of the things we'll hear about today, just haven't thought about them in this way. But the point of it is that you'll be able to apply this also into your lives and into your marriages and other relationships. I do hope, I'm going to try to mute people. Apparently, I thought this was supposed to mute people when they came in, but it doesn't seem to have been happening. So don't be offended if I've muted you just now. And so this is being recorded. We will be having it available here later today. Also, you'll be getting a brief survey. It takes about 3 minutes to take the survey just to let us know what your thoughts were on today, what was helpful, the most helpful to you, and as well, what would be some other things you'd like to know about. There is a chat window, so we will be having a time for Q&A with Dr. John and Dr. Joel. Each of them is going to be sharing for approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A time for about 15 minutes and then wrap it up. So there is a chat window. Please put your questions there. Last reminder, this is not what we do for a living, so please be kind in your feedback. We're here to share ideas and truly two of the leaders in what they do in conflict resolution, and I think you're going to be so glad that you joined us today. So with that, let me go and get into some of the next slides. So just a brief introduction. Many of you know me. I've been in practice now over 35 years, and the Wealth Legacy family of companies is actually 6 different brands. We primarily work with business owners and very successful business owners in the questions about the succession and the vague intentions that most business and professionals have. Those vague intentions about what are they going to do about their business and their exit. What do they do about their wealth and their income and their assets? And what are they going to do about their legacy and their philanthropy? Those are these vague ideas they have floating up around there, but very seldom do they take the time to get them put into a specific, measurable type of plan. And that's what we do. So I've been, as I said, been in practice a whole bunch of years, got a whole bunch of credentials after my name. It just means I love what I get to do, and we love the people we get to help, and I love our team, headed up by my beautiful and wonderful wife, Demian, but also Brian and Olha and Perla and Floor, and we've just got an amazing team. Dr. Joel Siegel, I have been a raving fan of this guy for a long time. And Joel just seems to he's an entrepreneur at heart, absolutely. And because of that, he knows how to speak to the hearts of entrepreneurs. He knows where they're getting stuck, and then he knows how to get them unstuck. And so also been so blessed to have Joel as one of our leading facilitators for our not-for-profit, the Center for Wealth and Legacy. I saw Ed Masters is on today. Hey, Ed. Ed was one of the very instrumental people in helping us start our nonprofit and to run it successfully, and now in our 11th year. Joel is a wonderful table facilitator, but he's able to literally get the stuck unstuck. So Joel, just so delighted to have you with us today. And last but not least is my good friend Dr. John Brustetter, who's with us from the East Coast this morning. John has been a personal friend for well over 20 years, but not only is he a brilliant organizational psychologist, that's a specialty in the area of psychology in terms of what makes people tick. But in addition to that, and I'm, so I just got a text letting me know that when people are calling on their cell phones, they're not being muted. So again, no offense. If you are calling in, if you would be so kind as to please mute your phones so we don't get your background noise, I really appreciate it. But also John has been working because of his father, who was also an organizational development psychologist. So they've got this marvelous collection of interviews that they've done with well over now 50,000 individuals and couples, which has led them to produce something that you're going to be so interested in seeing. This interplay, we actually use it in our practice. I've also been trained in it myself because it's an incredible tool. There are a number of wonderful tools out there, discs and other things that it can be used. Myers-Briggs, Kearney, why am I stumbling? There are a number of other tools out there, but I found some things using the interplay profile about myself and some of our clients that I've never seen any other way. So again, without any further ado, I wanted to, again, here's our agenda for today. We'll have Dr. Joel kick it off, then Dr. Brunstetter, and then we'll have our Q&A time. So unsticking this stock, effective conflict resolution, Dr. Joel Siegel. Joel, take it away.
Well, thanks, RJ. You know, you and I have worked together for many years as me being part of your Leadership Insights Forum. And I just want to say that beyond this morning's webinar, you offer a tremendous level of inspirational value to this community. And I have seen that up close and personal because I've watched you interact with guests. I've interacted with your guests. I've spoken to many people. I'm at these meetings. I facilitate tables, and I know that people think of you in a way that's now, RJ, well beyond your primary role as a wealth manager. You've become kind of an inspirational figure in the community because of all you do, and therefore I want to make sure that I gave you a shout out right at the very beginning so I didn't forget, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, so thank you for being you.
That's so kind of you. Thank you, Joel, and right back at you, my friend.
Good. So today, you know, I'm going to be also an avid listener of John and what you have to say in that model. We're going to talk a little bit here at the beginning about business partnership disagreements. I'm a business consultant. I'm a business coach. So what I do is, as the title of this webinar, I help people who are stuck get unstuck. But today, I mean, I help a lot of broad range of businesses and executives. Today, we're going to talk about some very specific things. And those are primarily, in the first instance, business partner disagreements. Many of you are in companies where you have partners. Some are junior partners. Some have a number of different shareholders. And some, excuse me, some are just two of you. So one of the main things in understanding business partner dynamics is really understanding the critical background of that. What I find is that when companies come to me, and one just came today, this week rather, a tremendously successful IT company in which the two partners are having a significant disagreement. And as I began to get into it, I discovered, as I usually do, that yes, there are elements that have to do strictly with business. Yes, there are elements that have strictly to do with staff. Yes, there are elements that have strictly to do with equity. But there are also some background elements as well. And I wanted to talk a little bit about those. RJ, can you put up some additional material from this slide? Good. So in terms of understanding the background dynamics, again, it's never just about the business dynamics relative to the equity, the business flow, the marketing plan, the staff, and the profitability of the company. Those are certainly important. But usually there are some background dynamics in the relationship between owners that have to do with these disagreements. And one of the big problems in business partner disagreements is that those background dynamics, whatever they may be, rarely get discussed, and they build up. It's almost like what happens in a marriage. You know, you go along with a person for a time and you have some disagreements, but because you want to keep the peace, you don't bring them up. later on at some point they rear their head, and when they rear their head, they're not really stable. They're in a difficult way. So that's what happens with business partnerships. And so what I do with my clients whom I coach is I try to find out where those are. Sometimes they're fairly minimal. Sometimes this is really a dispute about the direction of the company, its lack of profitability, wanting to move the company into another business sector. But many times it's about background dynamics between owners and between owners and shareholders. I have another company I'm working with in which there's a disagreement between the primary owners that has to do with some of these background dynamics, but there's also disagreements among the smaller shareholders. They are also not in agreement and have some relationship dynamic problems that are going on. So these are things that you need to explore in understanding why people get to the point where they're not getting along well. We just don't wake up one morning and go, you know, I'm not making enough profit and I'm going to buy Bob out. It just doesn't work that way. These things have a long history, and it's critically important as a coach, and I do this with every business partner disagreement I work with, that we explore those and try to get to the bottom of them. So having said that, that's kind of an overview of one of the most important things that gets overlooked. And please ask questions if you want to about that. Let's take a look at 50-50 partnerships. So, you know, again, a number of companies have 50-50 partnerships. Why do people have them? Well, because it's the easiest way to share with your co-founder. You know, you build a business with a co-founder and you want to share in the equity. And a guy and a gal, or two gals, or two guys say, yeah, let's divide it up 50-50. And it sounds great. And it usually works great at the beginning. But unfortunately, time, history, and documentation has shown us that these partnerships usually turn out to be problematic. And I hate to say that because we want to share equally with our co-founders and with our other partners. But 50-50 partnerships, and most of these, by the way, are partnerships in which two people started a business together, or one person started and another person came in and they became 50-50 partners, or another person bought in and became a 50-50 partner. And the reason these partnerships are so bad is because the ability to decide and master and sort through issues becomes fraught and troubled because of the equity sharing. When the equity sharing is exactly 50-50, there's no tiebreaker. Now, some companies are smart enough to introduce board members and governance members who can, from a nonprofit point of view, serve as a tiebreaker in dispute resolution. And that's great if they have those. But even where we have dispute tiebreakers as part of the governance structure, we oftentimes don't have resolution to the dispute. Because if you own 50% of the company and you disagree with what's going on, you're not budging. And neither is the other owner budging. And that's why we get into a situation where mediations, litigation, and other kinds of things tend to happen. It's interesting, though, isn't it, that in all my years as a coach, 50-50s are still the most popular partnerships. So what does that say? That says that people want to share, I think, with their co-founders, and that they believe in equality, and they believe that things will go okay. And again, for many businesses, they do go okay for a while. But when problems come up, they're not reconciled well. So what do I recommend? Well, among other things, we recommend that you do have governance structures that mitigate the problems that arise from a 50-50 partnership, the ones I just described. And in addition, we also recommend that we not do 50-50, that we do 51-49 or 52-48 or 60-40 or whatever we do. And if it's structured that way and structured properly within a legal framework, it makes it much easier to find a solution to some of these problems which otherwise can become intractable. So 50-50 partnerships have a bad name for a reason. And even though they all start well, many of them don't end well. And I want to go back for a moment and just say that in terms of my first point of understanding the background dynamics, this is another reason why 50-50 partnerships fail. There are issues beyond strictly profitability, equity, staff, growth, scale that affect the partners. And that is issues in their relationship, issues in how they're running the business. For example, I worked with a company some years ago. I was their business coach. I built their business tremendously, but they had one partner in the 50-50 who was very impulsive, very charismatic. He was always out on the street. He made tremendous business contacts for the company. And we had another partner who was very much in the office guy. He wanted to work on his computer. He was very much a systems guy, an operations man. You'd think that would be a good partnership. But what happened was the operational guy kind of became resentful that the other guy was sort of getting the limelight and the not doing really any of the hardcore operational work. And the partner who was out and very impulsive and very aggressive and very social didn't take the time to really do the background work he needed to do. And a dispute developed around their personality styles and how that played itself out in the business, and it became very intractable. So let's move on. The other thing we want to talk about in terms of business partner disagreements, we're moving through this quickly. I apologize for that. I could talk on each one of these topics for an hour, but I don't have an hour, so I have to move fast. We want you to check your documents in your business organization. Many times I go in and I find that things are not documented well in terms of partner agreements. The first thing you need to decide, obviously, is what kind of corporation are you? Are you an LLC? Are you an S Corp? Whatever you are, you need to first clarify that. And you'd be surprised how many businesses are unclear about their corporate organizational status and their governance. The second thing you need to do is to have a governing body. Every corporation, although not required by law, needs to have a governing body to provide additional governance, and additional monitoring beyond the shareholders. And so these documents need to be well formulated. And then there need to be documents that address, especially if it's a 50-50, a way to mediate and mitigate the impact of an impasse. These are things that can be documented in advance. And I work with attorneys who do this documentation. We find that when companies have this documentation, it massively reduces the level of tension during the regular business operations. And if the owners come to a disagreement, they can always go back and refer to the docs. Sometimes in business partnerships, we even institute a potential buy-sell at the very outset when neither owner has any intention of leaving the business. But just by putting those into play, we are able to forestall problems that may develop. Okay, well, let's move on to mediation. And when we get to the stage where partners aren't agreeing, then this is a key component in fixing business partner disagreements. I'm a mediation specialist. I've been doing it for many years. I work with
Joe, can I make a comment?
Sure, just jump in.
About the agreements. I've had a lot of companies I've worked with as well on understanding what our agreements are, and I think unmet expectations, unrealistic expectations, not shared expectations, and that comes at two levels. One, what is in writing, and have they agreed on that? And surprisingly, if anything's been documented, it's normally by the inside operations guy, not the one who's outside doing the other stuff. So when we review it's been documented, he said, well, I didn't agree with that. And the second part is the most disagreements I've found occur because the partners never really have discussed and agreed on what their shared expectations are. So I just want to support what you're saying. It makes so much sense.
Well, you're completely right, John. I not only thank you for saying that, but I wish we had a little more time to go into that, because those are the background factors I was alluding to. The unmet expectations, the lack of agreement about those things are exactly what drives these disputes. So moving on, mediation is the key. What do we do in mediation? What does it really mean? Well, here's what we do. We meet with people who are disagreeing individually. We get their expectations, as you said, John, and their needs. We understand what they want. We set up a format in which both sides can understand what the other wants. We do a lot of individual separate meetings before we put business owners together. We develop documents that have some compromise for both, and like in any mediation, in any context, political, social, marital, or business, we try to find a compromise solution for owners. And oftentimes this is very effective in reducing conflict and settling a disagreement, because most owners don't want to take it to the end where it becomes, very expensive and litigious. Most owners want to settle that. So mediation is a key component. The company I just took on that I mentioned earlier this week is an IT company in which one owner wants to buy the other out, and he is convinced that he does not want to work with the other guy anymore for reasons I'm not even sure of yet, because I'm just getting into it. But it was very difficult because he didn't want to mediate. He just wanted to institute a buy-sell that wasn't a good arrangement for either party. And so I was able to convince them to stop and mediate for a few weeks and see if we could come to a place where when they eventually do divorce, which they will, it'll be a better situation for both. So that's mediation in a very brief form. Happy to take questions about that. And then in terms of buy-sell agreements, obviously, if you're in a business or you know someone in a business where it's not going well, the best possible end is a buy-sell arrangement, one in which the owner who is retaining the business is able to pay fair market value, both in terms of equity and future equity, to the owner who is selling out. Oftentimes, we structure buy-sell agreements that are reciprocal. In other words, one has an opportunity to buy for a certain amount of time at certain figures, and then if he doesn't, then the other owner, she or he, can take that opportunity to buy. And those may work as well, although there are some problems with those. But buy-sells, if properly conducted, can be very effective in helping owners resolve a dispute where there is no other way out. But I do want to say, before we move on, that in buy-sell agreements, it's not just the money or the equity or the business. It's so many other things. It's the sweat equity. It's the staff. It's the relationships. It's your heart and soul. It's what you put into the company. So structuring buy-sell agreements is a very complex process. I don't do it alone. I work with a couple of attorneys and other advisors who help me with that. But that's the one step we can take to at least avoid a litigation. So that's something very brief, I know, overview about business partner disagreements. And looking at the last point about litigation, you know, all I can say to all of you business owners out there is do everything you can to avoid a business litigation. Because I guarantee you that in a business litigation, your equity will be eviscerated. By that, I mean that, you know, a lot of the money you have, both built into your business and your private capital, your reserve, your investments, will be spent on the attorneys. And even if you get to an end that works for you, even if you are triumphant and victorious in a litigation, you will have spent so much money that at the end of the day, you'll have to ask yourself whether it was worth it. I have had businesses that have gone into litigation that we've not been able to save. And at the end of litigation, these owners have reached out to me and said, Joel, I only wish I had done something else that you recommended and not let this go to litigation. Because not only is there money, I want to emphasize this to everybody, but it's not just about the money you spend on litigation, but it's about the litigation itself. It's a very difficult process. You know, it's a very hostile, aggressive, and adversarial process. And just going through that process can be psychologically damaging for owners. So, okay, that's a little bit about business partner disagreements. RJ, how am I doing on time?
We've got about 3 minutes left. How fast the time goes.
Wow, okay, I'm so sorry. Well, you know, we have a power-packed presentation today. I work with a lot of FOBs, family-owned companies, and all I can say about them, why don't you put the whole slide up there, and I'll just kind of give an overview since I don't have time to go through everything. Family businesses are built for disagreement. There are issues about executive positions, parents versus children, and equity. But let me just say this about family companies. Here's the story with family companies. If you're a family company, you have the best and the worst of all worlds. You have the best of all worlds because people you know and love and care are helping you run your business. If your mom and dad and your children, your adult children, are executives in your company, you feel comforted and safe because they are running the company, and they'll probably get the company when you retire or pass on. But the problem is that the relationships that everyone has as a family member affects the relationships they have in business. And that makes it very, very complicated, because we can't tell when a brother and sister executive are talking to each other as executives or as brother and sister or as both at the same time. And that can create tremendous conflict. Some of the most difficult cases I've ever had have been family-owned business cases. And I guess I have to wrap it there, but maybe in the Q&A, we'll have time to take some questions about that. In terms of C-suite, do I have a minute to speak about this, RJ?
Absolutely. This is a very important one as well.
Yeah, and I'll just try to summarize. I mean, I do a lot of work with teams and C-suite leaders and executives. And let me just try to say this. The biggest problem with C-suites is that CEOs, again, they have the power, but they don't necessarily have the right information or the right training to be able to manage their teams. I can't tell you how many teams I work with where the CEO is a problem. Not that they're not bright or smart, but they don't know how to empower their team. And of course, the leadership coaches have been talking about this for 50 years. But what I'm saying is that these are all critical issues for a leadership team. And the most important thing a leadership team can do is to better integrate with their CEO. The most important thing the CEO can do is get training and experience in how to be a better leader with their team. You don't know how many teams I've worked with that are actually held back by their CEO. Well, why is it? Why are they held back by their CEO? Let me just try to explain this real briefly in 1 minute. Power leads to certain things. When you have a lot of power and you build a company on your own, you feel a sense of entitlement, and power is corrosive. And so a lot of CEOs tend to, not really trust as much as they should some of their really, really great leaders on their team. That's where we need to go in helping teams to get along better with their CEOs and to ultimately to the benefit of the companies. So I know I have to leave it there. I always come with a lot in my box, and I'm happy to take questions.
Well, Joel, thank you. And that's why we've got time set aside for Q&A, because I know we've already started to get some questions coming in. So that's terrific. We're being effective. We're bringing things that people want to know more about. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. John Brustetter, who has created just a brilliant process with Interplay. And as I say, we use it in our office and with clients already. So John, please take it away.
Well, thank you. That's been very educational, Joel. Thank you. You brought back a lot of memories I've had with all the companies I've worked with, especially family-owned companies. One of the quotes that I want to start off with is by Anais Nin, a psychologist, who said, "We don't see things the way they are. We see things the way we are." And that is kind of the tone of my presentation today, that virtually all the unstuckness that we have comes from our inability to understand, communicate, and trust those around us. We tend to operate as if our reality, our awareness, our experience is really the only reality. If you want to look at the chart that RJ has for you there on conflict generation, look at the iceberg, and as we interact with others, try to understand why these conflicts occur, is that our initial and for many people, the most understanding we have about them is superficial. It's what we see, their behavior, their demeanor, and our research shows that our impression is basically based on 80% of that comes from our impressions of people like that, people we've known in the past. So we really don't give people much of a chance. We tend to label them and or put them in our box, not in theirs, and so we're not very open. And so we're essentially blind in most relationships. That doesn't hurt us until things get difficult or dicey, or until we have to get in a little deeper with them, which, next slide. We develop deeper or more casual relationships, not just superficial ones. And yet, even then, most of our impressions of others and the decisions we make about them are based on our own internal impressions, our experiences, our knowledge, our awareness, and we really don't give others full credit for who they are. We don't listen. We don't understand in the same way what they do. And so even in the casual relationships, which is most relationships, we're still about 60% blind. Next slide. The deepest understanding and really the key to business partnerships, relationships, getting unstuck is to, from the get-go, from the beginning, understanding others at the very basic core level, like in the iceberg. The deepest part of the iceberg is in its core base. And we don't go there. We don't take the time often with people. We don't truly understand where they're coming from. And yet, until we do, we don't really understand what they really need, what they really want, what their words mean, and where the conflicts are. We really don't understand where they come from because we don't understand what motivates them. So our objective in interacting in a business whether it be between business partners, between employees, with customers, is to learn how to understand and perceive and be aware of people, not from your perspective, but from theirs. Next slide. One of the tools we use for helping people understand, and we work with organizations top to bottom, and I've had, you know, a 10,000 person organization go through this, and then we've got a small mom and pop shop. We have each person in the organization complete a profile, and it's in 3 different phases. The first part talks about recognizing how people behave and understanding the differences in the first of those. Next slide. We recognize others. If you look at the matrix we have up there, we have people who prefer tasks up to the top, and people who prefer people at the bottom of the circle. People who prefer deliberateness to the left and fast pace. When you put those together, task-paced and fast-paced people tend to be what we would call doers. And you can think about people in your life who tend to be doer-oriented. Just do it, kind of the Nike slogan, achieve the results. They tend to be very what-oriented. They speak in quantity terms. They're always trying to maximize everything. And they're listening, but they're listening for things that show results, things that show goals and targets. And if you want, and we'll talk in a minute about, well, how do you respond to doers? The second would be the analyzer, which is also a task-oriented person, but goes more into the details, wants to do things well, not just fast, is more consumed by data, how things are done, quality, minimizing stability, and they listen for facts. And you can see from Joe's examples, there are different people in the organization who come from different perspectives, and so it's easy to understand why they get stuck, because they don't look at things the same way, they don't listen in the same way. Next slide. A more people-oriented approach are those we call the connector. They're building relationships, interaction-driven. They're looking at the who. How do we develop trust? They want to maximize the sharing of information and ideas, and they process feelings. And if you can just contrast that, of course, to the doer is looking for results, where the connector's looking for feelings. And the faster-paced, people-oriented person style, we would call the Energizer, dreaming impossible dreams, changing, why questions, synergy, maximizing creativity, and always looking for new and different ways of doing things. So just looking at that, you know, you might want to think where you might fall on that, and where you might, where your partners or those around you, or even your spouse may fall. And an interesting thing, in the 30 years I've been doing this, we find that most couples are a mixture of opposites, where you tend to attract to yourself someone who has a lot of what you don't have. And in the beginning, that's a great thing, because if I'm a doer and I connect with a connector, I have someone who's going to build relationships and help me with those, because I'm not as good with that. And my partner is going to value my ability to get stuff done, which he or she has not been able to do. And yet over time, those differences create conflict. And so, again, initially, why people often get connected is not because they're the same, contrary to eHarmony. People are often connected because they're different. They offer different opportunities. And the challenge is, okay, now that we're different, how do we work through and value and utilize and mutually synergize together, so that 1 + 1 = 3 or 4, instead of, as Joel talked about, conflict is created because people just can't get on the same page, they can't synergize, they don't listen, or there are other issues that are just getting in the way. So with that in mind, okay, here's the answer we're finding in the coaching we do with our clients. If you want to respond to others appropriately, first of all, you need to know where they're coming from. Next slide. And for the doer, when it doesn't take you long to be around a doer to know you're looking for someone who wants to see the bottom line. So you need to be responsive, focus on results, clarify expectations, as we spoke about before. This is really critical for the doer. Clarify expectations, because they think they know what the expectations are, and it's probably not what you think. Talk and write in bullets, be brief, and basically share the tasks. If the doer sees you doing your part, well, they're going to tend to be more willing to support you. Next slide. The analyzer approach is about preparation, probabilities, facts, analysis, risk analysis especially, documenting things in detail and not winging it, and sharing key details is a key factor in building their trust. They want to know that you know your facts and details. Next slide. A connector needs to know that you're sincere, that your focus is on others, not just things. Likes it kept informal, sharing concern, fairness, equity, openness, trust, and sharing feelings, which analyzers and doers have a real hard time with and often don't get, quote unquote, connected with a connector because they can't deal at a feeling level. Next slide. The Energizer, the responding to an Energizer is to be encouraging, focus on possibilities, reflect and clarify. It's real important. Energizers are like ping pong balls on a dryer. And you need to reflect and clarify continually to understand, well, where are they today and how do I deal with them? Support good ideas, not just all ideas. Offer to follow up with them, and of course, be open and honest, and again, sharing ideas. What's interesting, if you look at these, when we look at the opposites, often the analyzer really desperately needs an energizer in his or her life. And often the energizer is that complementary energy, the hole, the gap in their space. And vice versa. The energizer desperately needs the analyzer around him or her to fill in all the details and to fill in the blanks that often they're not paying attention to or don't take as seriously. The connector doer, again, it's interesting how they are complementary. The doer needs that human connection that the connector brings, but the connector also needs that sense of getting stuff done and making tough decisions and coming to conclusions. So as we can begin to see, there are different approaches, there are different ways to respond, but the challenge becomes, how do you deal with differences and build openness and trust? And we have found the more we can understand and speak the language, speak the communication language of those around us, the more open, the more trusting, the more communicative things get. Next slide. In the book that I wrote, I came up with what I call the team chemistry pledge, and I think if each of us in organizations as well as in our personal life can live by this pledge, my clients have said this has been transformative in their relationships, especially at work. First, to encourage teammates to speak first as often as possible. Keep my mouth shut and my ears, mind, and heart wide open as long as possible. Listen well, especially when I don't feel like it, with a sincere desire to be influenced. I will respond to others using their communication language as much as possible. I will be an encouraging spirit, even if I'm not particularly fond of others or disagree with what they're saying. And finally, this is especially critical with partners, I will wait until we are alone to first address apparent conflicts with them, taking a collaborative win-win approach. Next slide. For those who have participated today, I'm offering an opportunity, no charge to you, to receive your own personalized profile, 11-page report with color graphics and narratives. The link is there. Just go on that link and complete the profile. I will get a hold of you and share your results with you. And I am hoping to bring into life the specifics, the generalities that we talked about today in your specific situation, and help you to understand how to be better at communicating with partners, family members, members of your organization, and with clients.
John, thank you. And this is, I've got to tell you, this is a wonderful tool. It's fascinating. We do it, as I say, we not only use it for with our clients, but we use it internally. So I can see where my wife is and where our other team members are. And there's no one's good or bad. I mean, we just are who we are. So part of it is just getting clear and accepting and being comfortable with that. I remember one time I did use this for an all-suite hotel chain, and was visiting with the president afterwards and asking how she felt that we had done in terms of both her and her 4 vice presidents. And she said, well, I thought really, the technology was spot on for each of the 4 individuals that work with us here. I really felt that you nailed it. And I said, so, okay, that's great to hear. How did it do for you? And she said, well, there were some things that were accurate, but I didn't feel like you really captured me in full, but it was okay. I'd say it was 50-50. Well, what was really interesting is I've heard that comment before, and then I went and asked each of the vice presidents about how they felt the technology did for them and for their colleagues. And then I asked, how did it do with the president? And all 4 of the vice presidents said, you nailed her. This technology is amazing. Within literally 12 minutes, you nailed who our boss is. So about 2 weeks later, I happened to be chatting, was back visiting with the president, and I said, in retrospect, how have you given more thought to what the technology showed, and any more thoughts or feedback on that? She got a little sheepish, and she said, I got to tell you, at first I didn't think it was very accurate at all, but the more I've been thinking about it and asking my husband and others that know me well and letting them read that technology and the interplay, the more it truly nailed who I am. And it's just that there were some things there that were revealed that I really didn't want to hear. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to see it. Again, we're just these incredibly complex individuals that God has made us uniquely to be. So it's neither good nor bad, but it's important, though, to understand who we are. And that it's not just that I don't like paying attention to the details. I am an energizer. If there was a 4th ring, I would probably be on the 4th ring. So therefore, I need to have people like my wife and our in-house attorney, Brian, and who are very much analyzers and people that are paying attention to details. That's their strength, and I need to lean into that because that's not a strength for me. I can make it, I can work at it, but it's not my inherent wiring. So we've got some great questions that have come in. Joel, why don't we start with you? And let's talk about mediation. The question that was asked is mediation really helpful in resolving business partnerships dispute? And if so, why?
Well, thanks for asking, RJ. Yeah, I mean, mediation is really the only successful solution to business partnership disagreements. Buy-sells always have problems. People are usually unhappy in some way with the results, and litigation is apocalyptically bad. But mediation is a solution. In mediation, we can get, as John, you were referring to throughout your wonderful presentation, we really get into some of the deeper aspects of what's going on in the conflict. And I talked about this, unfortunately, not at enough length at the outset of my presentation. So we're able to solve in mediation two different kinds of problems. Number one, specific business problems. Problems of staff, problems of profitability, the direction of the business, who's the CMO, what do we do? Those kinds of things we solve in mediation quite rapidly. And then in mediation, we're able to solve deeper problems that exist between owners. And that's really the only path. And I have to tell you that I've done so many successful mediations. They're not easy, because you have to end up digging deep and probably using methodology such as John's. But if you can get to the end of the road, it will be a tremendous outcome. So yeah, that's why we do it, and that's why it's successful.
Perfect. Great. John, question for you is, I mean, and this is a classic one. I kind of chuckled when I saw it, was you were sharing the 4 different styles, and I know there's actually a 5th style, the flexible, that you have uncovered that's fascinating for our purposes today. Obviously, to save time, we didn't get into it. But the classic question of, why can't we just all get along with each other? Can you comment on that for us? And I hope I didn't mute you. We're getting some background noise, so if you're muted right now, just you can press your space bar.
Here there, RJ.
There
I got it.
Okay. So
yes,
the classic. Why can't we all get along and play in the sandbox well together?
Well, we always come to relationships assuming that we know ourselves, we know others, and that we're all playing from the cards from the same deck. And we assume we all know the same things. We've all been in the same places. We've all come to the same conclusions. And I know that sounds naive, and I know intellectually we know that's not true. But often we just don't understand those around us. We don't listen to them. We really don't hear. And what tends to drive us all, and my dad used to say, people end up always doing what they believe is in their own self-interest. So when we're listening and we're interacting, always at the core of everything is, what's in it for me? Where am I coming from? What are my needs? And often when we're interacting with others, the understanding part and the trust part doesn't happen, because we really are not in a mindset of building trust and understanding others. We're trying to get our own needs met.
Perfect. And while you're on here, by the way, I understand that there are a couple of you that have had trouble hearing some of the content. So yes, this is being recorded, and yes, we will be sending this out to everyone that's on the call and on the webinar. John, why don't you keep going? We've all been we've been raised with the golden rule, which is to treat others the way we want to be treated, and yet I'm kind of hearing that maybe doesn't apply, or at least doesn't apply in all.
Well, it's different. The golden rule is fine in its core, and that's assuming that we all have the same value system. But when we need to treat people the way they want to be treated. If I'm an analyzer and I'm dealing with a taskmaster, I'm not going to treat the taskmaster or the doer. I'm not going to treat the doer like I am, because the doer isn't going to respond to things the way I respond to it. So instead of treating others the way I wish to be treated, I have to learn what works for them. What are their needs? How do they want that information presented? Where and how do I connect with them to build that trust? And if I can't find that common ground, I'm going to have some significant issues. And we have found this tool, the 20 factors, when people start sharing their similarities and differences and making accommodations with one another about where they're different. For instance, if I need to do a lot of talking and others around me also need to do a lot of talking, I need to figure out how am I going to split the difference, or what is an appropriate amount of airtime. And when we go through the profile, we find areas where people need to make changes in how they interact with others. And now that I have the profile available to me in dealing with my people, with my clients, with my staff, with my life partner, I treat them very differently than I naturally would have done it. And it isn't the way I want to be treated in most cases.
Perfect. Joel, got a question for you. And the questioner asked that, gee, it seems like there are a lot of CEOs that are difficult to work with or to get through to, and yet they have highly competent staff. Do you want to comment on that? I'm not quite sure where that questioner was going with all of that, but it did make me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, well, I discussed it a little bit earlier, and just briefly to say that CEOs themselves are usually very bright, obviously, and very talented. They build companies on their own. It's the question of the relationship between the two and the power dynamics. But oftentimes, following up on what you said, John, if you have a CEO, as any person who's not insightful and not really listening to others, often CEOs hear mostly themselves, and they hear their own voice and they hear their own vision. So following up on your model, John, and trying to integrate the two, if you have a CEO who's doing that, he's not really going to be able to hear what his team is saying. And more than that, he's not really going to be able to react to it in a positive way because he's following his own internal voice, his own internal vision, where he wants to go. And we need to kind of break that down. There are a number of ways in business coaching that we do break that down. The main way, the first way I always begin is with CEO training. Because I will oftentimes say to a CEO, look, Bob, you built this company, you made it great, it's fantastic, but now I need to teach you how to do the job. You built the company, but now I need to teach you how to lead this company. Do you understand that? And many CEOs will resonate with that, and they'll go, okay, I want to hear what you have to say about that. So that's kind of somewhat of an answer to your question, RJ. I think the other part about that is that oftentimes CEOs will respond better if you make it about the team initially. I know that sounds terrible, but that's reality. In other words, if I say to CEO, Bob, I need to coach your team on this or that, Bob will be happy to have me do that. While I'm coaching Bob's team, I will then be able to move that team closer to Bob, and eventually we will get a more harmonious integration between his vision and the team's functioning so that people don't leave, people continue to be engaged, and the company continues to grow its culture in a proper way.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's very helpful.
Hey, Joel, can I add? Joel, I might add something here.
Sure.
Go ahead, John.
The email by Gerber is a phenomenal book that talks to what you're talking about, not only for CEOs, but also for other founding partners and others, because organizations change as they grow. And once the organization is built, the founders need to let go and empower and others. And one of my VC partners said the value of a business is its ability to function without the founders.
Well said.
So empowering and setting up and that's the email focus. How do you set up? We call it a make it like a franchise. You want to set this business up like it's a franchise, like you're going to build it elsewhere, and everything is going to be buttoned up, and the positions, the roles, and the activities are clearly defined. So again, really support what you're saying there, that CEOs often get in the way and they forget that empowerment is their future.
Right. This is a problem I deal with all the time. Fortunately, it's a problem that's solvable. That's the good news.
Amen.
A shout out to Michael Gerber. He actually lives here in San Diego. We've been trying to get him in for one of our events, and so hopefully we'll have Mr. E-Myth himself be with us at some point.
Awesome.
Hey, John, question here that's been asked is it possible for somebody to change their style and their motivators, their communication style? Is that possible to change?
Yeah. Well, let me start off by saying yes. It is possible if they want to. And we have found over time that changing style is done if people see that what they're now doing isn't working and they want to do something different so that they're better in their relationship building, their trust building, their communications. So when people are willing to listen to feedback from those around them on what is not working for them, some folks say, well, what do I need to do? How do I change? And eventually, people, when they learn new ways of approaching that is not natural for them, but over time, like in virtually anything, it takes so many iterations to turn something into a way of behaving or a habit. If people seriously want to change the way they approach things, they can do that. And it takes time and effort and discipline, but yes, it can happen.
And if I might add just to that, that's always the goal of business coaching. With whatever professional you're working with, to be able to change your orientation, to be able to listen better, to be able to reflect on your dynamics in a different way. If we achieve that with our clients, we have unlocked the doors to all business growth. If we don't achieve that, we don't get anywhere.
So I want to remind you that we've got a chat box there. So you've been sending questions. If you have some more questions, let us know. And we're going to be wrapping up here in the next minute or so. Let's see. And, you know, Joel, perhaps you could go back to, because I do see, and I've had the pleasure of getting to work with several 50-50 partnerships that seem to work pretty well. But I really took in your comments early on that 50-50 partnerships, for the most part, just don't work. At some point, there's going to be an impasse that they're going to run into and not get through without, at least without mediation.
Yeah. RJ, can I comment on that?
Yes, John.
The issue with the 50-50 partnerships is that they have not adequately dealt with the issue of trust. They're assuming that the 50-50 partnership will deal with trust because they're equal. But the trust issue, often expressed by equity, you know, all the disputes about equity has to do with trust. It's really not about equity. So again, the 50-50 partnership, there needs to be, if ever that is done, and I agree with Joel, I've never seen it work. You need to deal with this issue of trust, and having someone who is going to lead, someone who's going to follow, someone who's got different abilities and skills, and there needs to be the courage to identify in the partnership who has got the ability and who do we allow and to support to do different things, and giving one of the partners basically the ability to run the company is a key part of its success.
So thank you, John. RJ, let me just jump in here and kind of, you were asking that question as well. So let me just provide an answer before we finish up. And this may be more helpful to all of our listeners in a germane sense. Taking the most benign aspect of 50-50 partnerships, people change over time. People develop other interests. People change in what they want in business, what they want in life, how they see business. We can't stop people changing and developing. So what happens is, RJ, even in the best 50-50 partnerships that aren't contaminated by other problems, these changes that occur to people affect their view of what they're doing and the partnership. Even if they don't dislike the other person, you know, they don't have interpersonal problems with them, their growth and change often leads them to want something else in terms of the business, in terms of their equity, in terms of their investments, in terms of their life. And that's where these problems can develop, even in the most benign sense.
Wonderful. Well, and I see that just typing a response to one of our listeners who's was thanking both of you for the wonderful presentation, and he was heading out. So I want to thank Dr. Joel Siegel and Dr. John Brustetter so much for what you share with us today. There's obviously so much more. We're just getting started. And I'm sure that both of you would be willing to take an email. Joel, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you if they had a question?
Yeah, you can just reach me through my LinkedIn profile, or you can reach me at my email, which is simply info@joelsiegelphd. Pretty simple, JOELSIEGELPhD.com. No caps, no spaces. And I do want to add that all of my potential clients get a pro bono consultation. So if you have any questions about the things we brought up, if you're a business owner who's experiencing some of these challenges, I'm happy to meet with you pro bono to discuss it and to carry on with what we've brought up today.
Fantastic. Thank you. And John, how about for you? What's the best way for someone to reach you? And I may have put John on mute. Sorry, my friend. Tap your space bar or I will unmute you here. There you go.
Are you there?
Now you're on. Unmuted.
Okay, it's PJ Brunstetter, my last name, at teaminterplay.com. You can also go to my website, teaminterplay.com. It's www.teaminterplay.com. It's a new website, pretty exciting stuff, and it'll share a lot of things, including how to get a hold of me.
Perfect.
And if I can just throw in, RJ, it may be easiest for people to go to my site, which is just joelsiegelphd.com, and you'll be able to contact me through there.
Well, good. Again, it's SIEGEL.
PhD, right.
Well, terrific. Well, just to wrap up today, we've got a couple things coming up I want to make sure that you know about in September. On September 9th, a Wednesday, from 9 to 10 Pacific, we're going to be having a fascinating concept. This is a brand new idea that you might find situations where you've got a lot of money that's built up in a retirement account in your business, but you can't. You don't like the investments and you want to be able to direct or self-direct those investments. Well, there's a tool that allows you to do that. You can actually move money out of your company or corporate retirement account and put it into a self-directed IRA. It's quite a clever idea. But in addition to that, there's a number of different ways in which this idea can work. It's called an in-marriage quadro. Normally, I'd only seen quadros used in divorce situations. We'll be telling you more about it, but it's really quite a clever idea. And so again, you may want to join us for that. And then let's stay in touch. And I mentioned our quote actions. It's something that we provided absolutely free. Just let us know, send us an email. We're happy to add you. I know seeing some of the names on our call today, I know several of you are already receiving it. We are going to be, Olha, our wonderful marketing manager, is going to be sending out a survey. Please fill that out. It'll literally take you 3 minutes. And then if this was helpful today, you can sign up. Just let us know that you would like to be added to our monthly webinar list. We've got some more wonderful topics such as you heard today with people that are subject matter experts like Dr. Joel and Dr. John. And then last, we do have a monthly newsletter. We make it ourselves. We take it it's ripped from the headlines, situations that we're working with that may be commenting on the new tax bills. So earlier this year, we gave you some insights on how to take advantage of the new tax bill, the new CARES Act. There's also most recently an email or a newsletter that we created from some very challenging situations inside a business partnership. So anyway, you'll get an email from us with all the details. Thanks so much for being with us. Again, Dr. Joel and Dr. John, thank you so much. God bless everyone. It's been said that we are all in the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. You know, there are people out there that are simply not doing as well as you or I might be doing. So it certainly is so important for us to be looking for those situations where we can just make a difference in someone's life. Buy them a meal. Give them an extra tip when you go through the Jack in the Box line or pick up your favorite dinner from. Why don't you double the size of your normal tip? Just make sure that you're smiling at people. Make sure that when you're out walking or that you're the person to say, good morning, neighbor. How are you? And have a great day today. Just make a difference in somebody's life. You never know what someone is struggling with at that particular moment in time. So with that, God bless. I'm RJ Kelly from Wealth Legacy Group. So delighted that you could be with us. Reach out to us. You can reach me at rj@wealthlegacygroup.com, rj@wealthlegacygroup.com. With that, I'll say goodbye for now.
Have a blessed day. Have a blessed day.